All right. Hello and welcome everyone to the Grit and Bear It podcast. New look, new setting, same something. Okay, is hey, look, we got a new logo up there in the corner. Totally not AI whatsoever, completely not. Banners up here. And hey, I'm just like every other YouTuber now. I have memorabilia on my wall. See, I'm just like everybody else now. Anyway, welcome to the Grits and Barrett podcast, everyone. It is a Monday, either a Monday, June 8th, 2026, if you're watching this on the YouTube or on Facebook or wherever else, or on audio, it is Tuesday, June 9th. Whatever it is, your mileage will vary. Remember that. And welcome to the first and only Hershey Bears podcast out here in the market. As always, we are presented by you, Hershey Bears fans, as you are the ones that keep this show going. So since even though the season ended about a month ago, I I'm a little bit late, but I'm bringing my tag team partner, my partner in crime, Corey Swartz, part of Hershey Bears Nation, always pumping out the content. If I slave over a hot microphone during the off season, he slaves over a hot keyboard over the off season. Corey Schwartz joining me. Corey, brother, how you doing, man?
Hey, Richard, doing all right. Thanks for having me. You're very kind with your words that about the content. I'm just like you. We're all just wishing the Bears were still playing hockey as we're talking about this right now. We were spoiled for a little while there. Uh, as we're recording this, I actually just put out an article just being like, I just miss playoff hockey, and like it's weird to say, like you said, that it's been a month since the Bears season ended, and you look back at the runs and stuff like that, we'd be just starting to talk about the finals at this point. It's just a little hard to believe that we're sitting here thinking about and talking about the summer and all the stuff we got lined up for the show.
Yeah, and your feed is extremely active because you've been posting memories of those back-to-back runs. And even I see those, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that goal. Oh yeah, Riley Scott Sutter scoring this important goal. Oh yeah, Hendrix Lapierre did get that one and only goal in Rochester. And by the time all of you really start listening to this, you're probably going to be putting up some Coachella Valley goals by this point.
Yeah, we're going to be at that series soon enough. I get a little bit of a break because there's a couple of segments where the Bears did not win to start either of those 2 years in those series. So it'll be a little bit of a break, but I think I'm just going to start doing whole threads of these because it's too cool to not post like multiple goals and moments from those runs. So very excited for those ones, and reliving those because we're not going to be going that deep into June again with the way the next season's looking and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be a little bit of a different landscape.
We'll get to that when the time comes. So let's kick off with, at the time of this recording, the news today, and I'm sure a lot of Bears fans will know this by the time this video debuts, but we'll talk about it here. It is official. It is a final, and ironically, for all of you watching, it is Aaron Ness has retired. He said goodbye officially on on all the socials. He gave a big long letter. With my ADHD, there's no way I read the whole thing, but I get the general idea. Thank you, Aaron Ness, for everything you've done. Great guy, such a good sport. Captain the Bears for I think 7 years, 6 or 7 years. He's been with the Bears for 7 years. And man, it feels like longer. But Aaron Ness, he is done. He's played on the Sound Tigers, Providence Bruins, a cup of coffee with the Tucson Roadrunners. Not a lot of people know that. And I'm probably sure there's more I forget, more from his junior days. But Aaron Ness, oh, captain, my captain, so long, and thanks for all the fish and all the memories, too.
Yeah, it's sad because you look at the end of the season press conference, you could see a guy who I've said in my one article I wrote about him that you could see visibly the hockey injuries he's taken with missing teeth, and then that he's had so many injuries, so many surgeries, it was a total thrill to have him back for the end of the season. What looked like an impossibility at one point to have him back as, you know, uh, even for the regular season, let alone the playoffs, like they had him. And he's just such a difference maker, like on and off the ice. Like you think about him during the playoff runs where, they have the locker room and he's in there and he said, if we win this one, it's the winning's the best feeling. And like, just a absolute warrior, an absolute leader, one of the best people as well as defense, the epitome of you know, the Bears mantra where they sign good hockey players and really good human beings too. So, what's there to say about him? He's phenomenal. It truly won't be the same without him. And it leaves a huge gaping hole for the Bears to have to try to find a equivalent of his, caliber in free agency. And again, the worst part, one of the old gunslingers from the Calder Cup years is gone.
Yeah, let's see if this will work here. Seat of your pants broadcasting at its finest here. Let's see if this will work. Bring this up here. See if it'll work. Yeah, it actually did. So what you're seeing here is actually Aaron Ness's career up here. Minnesota University of Minnesota prospect, as it's see on here. Sound Tigers, Islanders, Sound Tigers. You did have one run with Hershey, 15, 17, and 18, 19. Then, as I said, off to Tucson. He was with Arizona during the you know what, Providence for a year, and then 4 years with the Bears. Heck of a run. I mean, that is lengthy. Former second round draft pick the by the Islanders, 40th overall in the 2008 draft. That doesn't make you feel old. I don't know what does. But yeah, nearly 20, nearly 18 years. 18 years, at least professionally. I don't count college, but man, that is a heck of a run and a long one with spanning a lot.
I think if my memory serves me, he's just shy between AHL regular season and playoffs. I think it's just shy of 900 total games. Just in he obviously crests that easily when you factor in his NHL experience. So way over 900 games pro for him, and just like you said, that's a long time to be playing just the sport, and two different stints for the Bears. And he was one of the few several players during that first 4 years block that he was here where you were like, it just felt unfair that they didn't get to win a Calder Cup. And then you have that great second tenure where he was really one of the key pieces to the Bears having that skill and talent to push them over the hump in 23 to win that Calder Cup. And then, just this great base between him and Dylan McElrath and, so many of those other great leadership veteran guys that were there. Just in terms of at least the Hershey history, obviously a guy who, I think the Bears put out a graphic at the time where he's first, he's within the top 10 and all these different categories for the Bears. And, that's hard to do for the Bears. The Bears are such a storied franchise. You especially look at it, nowadays where you say like how hard it is to, uh, even be there for a couple of years, let alone as long as Ness has. So, certainly a guy that you'd love to see get all of the honors as soon as he possibly can when he's eligible for it, for sure.
Oh, I'm sure he will. I think a very safe assumption is that actually, well, like I I overshot it on that one. I think that there is a good possibility. I want to say he's a Bears Hall of Famer. Um, that I think he might have the accolades to do it. Calder Cup, like aside, like he's got two of the Calder Cups. He was involved with three of the runs, and not a lot of fans. Well, some fans might remember, and I don't have the graph up here, but he had 12 assists during that 15-16 run. 12 assists for Aaron Ness, and I just looked at it and I'm like, that can't be right, because even with the the this past run, the past both runs, he only had 3 points total. So I know he's more like a stay-at-home defenseman than like an offensive defenseman, but who isn't these days? And it also shows you that, like with the Bears this past season, when he was out, the defense really felt lost when he was not there. Corey Schooneman, bless him, he tried, but you noticed when Ness came back, like how better the defense felt.
And you need multiple guys for that, right? Like it was the same way in the Cup years where you have like Dylan McElrath and Gabriel Carlson was another good one, where for the first time around, and they were able to plug some of those different gaps internally there. But like you said with Ness, I mean, like this is a guy who his second go around with Hershey he was a very different player by then. I mean, the last time he was in Hershey before he came back was that 18-19 season where I think he had 5 goals and 50 assists to lead all AHL defensemen in scoring. And you're like, wow, that's such a crazy stat. Are we getting that guy? And you could tell very early on that it wasn't the same, but he's got what he didn't do offensively, he did defensively. Where this is a guy who sells out, has the a perfectly timed poke check, just an excellent guy for a young defenseman to learn from, and adapt to the aspects of their game too. Just and like you said, this past year's team, it was noticeably different. He makes every player on the ice a little bit better, and that's at the AHL level, especially with how thrown to the wolves this past year's team was in many aspects with injuries and all the different ebbs and flows of the season. They did an admirable job all the way around. So I you know it's just going to be, you don't get many Aaron Nesses in this league, especially anymore. So it's one of those things where you really have a tall task ahead of you to find somebody who's half the man that he is.
Yeah, and you're right. You don't find men like Ness in this league, and it's a very tall order of what the Bears are going to have to do this offseason. But we're going to save that for later on in the show. So let's take a look back on like this Bears season, and I think the question I really want to ask you is like this past season. I think the Bears ended up where we all thought they were going to do. The Bears were going to be a 500 team. They weren't getting a first round bye this year, but they were going to be fourth, fifth. I mean, maybe third if we got lucky. And we win a best of 3 playoff series, but then we get beaten by a better team, and that's pretty much what happened. But I think the route to get there was not what anybody expected, and I think is what leaves a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths is the way we got there. That if you take a look at where the Bears ended up, the season was a success and was exactly what we thought it was going to be. Ilya Protas came along really well. Andrew Cristall developed really well. The Bears got their first skating rookie of the year ever. That's very hard to believe that he was the very first skater. The one before that was a goalie by the name of, what was it? Ron Hextall, I think, somebody like that. Never heard of him. But I kid. Flyers fans, calm down. But yeah, like that was the last time like the Bears even got a rookie of the year. So there's a part of me that wants to say we wasted a really good year out of Ilya Protas, but I think the Bears just had a lot of things working against them this season. That even though the end did not justify the means on how we got there.
I think that's very fair to say because when you look at the sum total of things, it's easy to get lost in saying you want to blame one thing, and for a lot of fans, it's the coaching, it's the this, the that, and like you said, this season will go down as kind of a missed opportunity with just how excellent Ilya Protas was and Andrew Cristall in his first year. But what I think to me adds up is that there was a lot of things that went wrong that hardly anybody would be able to account for. You look at Sheldon Rempel as an early example. Guy that I hate to say just jumps ship and goes back because he's getting a better payday overseas. Losing Ethan Frank, which was I think the writing was on the wall there in some ways, but it was bound to happen. Just not the way that we wanted it to. Then you look at the injuries. The Bears got Just there's lots of moving parts. Ness, Smallman, Allen, there's tons of injuries, tons of ups and downs. I tell you what, those months of, February into March and some of April were hard months to really, feel anything at different points. Like that was a challenge. But then, like you said, you get this playoff run where, the Bears could have easily gone out like punks to Bridgeport, who had their number for most of the second half of the season, especially. They overperform and, sweep them into non-existence, which is crazy that the Bears did that again. But and even
Mhm.
with Wilkes-Barre, I mean, we were talking before the show that one or two things happens there. They don't give up a goal in overtime in Game 3, and you get one different bounce in Game 4. It's a best of 5. You might be talking about a Bears win, which is crazy to think because of Wilkes-Barre's. They're so much higher in the standings and stuff, and so you felt them kind of coming around and finding, a bit of an identity there in those series. And it, kind of leaves an odd taste in your mouth because you're like, man, this could have been so much more. But also, how much did we suffer through? So, you really kind of want to have the Bears learn from those mistakes that they could have avoided during the season with, personnel, with, obviously some of it, hindsight's 2020 every time, of course, but just to have a season where this doesn't happen again. And it's going to be a challenge in a big way.
Yeah, I think that yes, like we ended up where we were supposed to, and yeah, we had you know, everything you said was right. A young team, a new coach, lowered expectations from what we usually want out of a team this year, and a lot of fans were willing to accept that. Like, like if for people who on the Facebook page who watched some of the recap videos I did, the first half of the season, all the way through the teddy bear toss, I was very subdued toward this team because I was like, okay, this team is young. They're working through injuries. Okay, yeah, Wilkes-Barre's much better than us. Okay, Lehigh, yeah, all that. Okay, we know Providence is good. We know Laval's good. We have a good night on Teddy Bear Toss night, as no matter what our season is, we always seem to, except for that one Bridgeport game, which we never speak of. Um, but I think I can definitely know like the first Hartford game all the way back in January, and that was one of those odd Tuesday night games where we lost in overtime during that 10 game point streak where 6 of those points were all loser points. And don't even get me started with loser points. Hockey Twitter has beaten that horse to death over the past 2 months. But that was where I really saw like this team was really starting to underachieve, and it didn't feel like there was a way out of it, or nobody wanted to take this team out of it. And that was my big upset. Like when I was really upset because I was starting to see players who I wanted to step up, and there's one in particular that everybody knows of. And screw it, I'll just come out and say it. I expected more out of Miro this year. Like I really thought this was a year. I know he's only 20 or 21, but this is a year where okay, you don't have your vets. Here's a chance for you to step up, take the reins, and really take over this league. And instead, he just muddled around, wanted to be in Washington so badly. He finally got it. I felt like he sulked when he came back. And then around March or April, he finally consistently more started getting on the score sheet a lot more. But I just felt some guys just didn't really come along this year outside of Protoss and Crystal, who were great, but it just felt like it felt like underachieving at times.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's a lot to be said about guys who, were thrust into roles that maybe they weren't ready for. The injuries didn't help on any of
No.
those fronts. But as you said, there were some guys that, that like Muro's a perfect example of a guy who was, you would expect to see him, hit new goal totals and, you know, be the missing cog for the offense, especially after he came back from Washington. and it just kind of didn't happen that way. And you could say what you will about the skill level maybe not being where you want it to be, but there was some times where I can remember specific plays where they're just these turnovers that can't happen for an aspiring NHLer type of thing. And Washington's a historically hard team for prospects to make. They have a high bar for excellence and for good reason. And you have to live up to that, and it has to be a 200-foot game. And you know, skill or no skill, Rempel and Frank or none of them, there's, you still have to, you look at Ilya Protas, who consistently turned guys inside out. And, he was able to, you think back to that one game in Wilkes-Barre towards the end of the season where, you know, Pro could have easily scored that goal that would have given him 30 to end the season, but he passed it off to Suzdalev. Like, he's just such on another plane that
Yeah.
that's a guy who is going to be in the NHL next year. And quite frankly, with Miro, it wasn't quite enough. And there's a few different performances that were like that, but it really reminds me a lot of the 21-22 team where you think back to how they had Marcus Vella and Drake Rimshaw and these guys that
Yeah.
it was a struggle bus kind of thing. And the Bears were kind of like that at times. The fourth line wasn't the the Strome, Trineyev, Sutter trio that could give you a couple goals here and there. It was the depth wasn't there, and that when that doesn't happen, that heightens the pressure on guys like Miro and also makes it a little bit more difficult for them because they're able to key in on some guys and play them. That doesn't give anybody a pass by any means, but it just makes it that much more of a grind to get a goal going or to capitalize on a play when you're relying a little bit too heavy on some of these guys. So I I agree with you that there's some guys that should have and could have stepped up a little bit more, but it was just kind of a grind at points. And it was a Bears team where you're gonna have to win 2-1 on a couple of goofy goals or 3-2, and Stevenson saves one for you. There that it was that type of year, and that's not the flashy, interesting hockey that fans really want to see, I think, too.
No, I agree with that. That like we've been so used to high flying and high scoring teams that when you kind of like we're going to go to a hard working team instead of a run and gun team. It's a shock, and I think, and we talked about this on the pre-show. It took the Bears literally until the last weekend of the season until they found out who and what they were. Like the Bears turned into a hard-working team, a physical team that's going to push you around, that's going to win a game 3-2 or 4-2 with an empty net goal, 5-2 if they're feeling froggy. It's not going to be 8-1, which that was the one outlier this season. They're not going to blow you out, but they're going to make you work for it. And we saw that against Bridgeport. We started to see that against Wilkes-Barre until their talent just won. But I think if that identity would have been found earlier in the season, there would have been much less headaches as we headed into the springtime. And it just felt like this team never really found its identity. And yes, the constant lineup juggling by King did not help. The injuries did not help. But it just took a long time for this team to find its identity.
Yeah, even with the maximum, amount of health, good fortune, this was always going to be a tougher team to play on than especially, when you lose two 30-goal scorers and, all the things that happened going into this season that, you sort of had to roll with the punches on where, it was always probably going to be a little bit more it's like I said, some of it you can't predict. And, we saw how many times did we see the Bears kind of have bad luck too, where, it was down to the final game of the season where, Andrew Crystal tucks a puck through the crease on an empty net. Wilkes-Barre immediately takes it the other way and capitalizes on it. And that's basically game at that point. Like, that sort of thing happened all the time. They couldn't get, what I guess I might just call like bad hockey breaks. And where it's just like, the worst thing that could possibly happen happened a lot. And it was frustrating to watch. I mean, you think of some of the guys, these young defensemen that they have there too, like, you know, they try to make a flashy play sometimes. It happened to some more than others. Um, Ryan Chesley is a prime example of that, a guy with a lot of hockey talent who, you know, um, almost everything that he did just ended up in his own net somehow. And you feel for the kid at the time is that, he is a guy who skates well and I hate to sound like I'm picking on him because I really think that he could turn into something really great. But this is a guy he makes hockey plays and a lot of them just didn't work out. And you feel for the kid. He's a smart, heady guy who jumps into the rush. And, how many times have you seen that be an absolute, boon to any team? And it just didn't work. And it just felt like it was just everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. So, I mean, in a sense, it's flush this down the toilet. Let's, burn the tape and start fresh next season. And, I'm interested to see how he's going to do on, hopefully have an opposite of what you call a sophomore slump, where it's going to be a sophomore sensation or something like that, for some guys like that in their second years.
So let's just, kind of address I think the one bigger issue of the season was, of course, some of Derek King's demeanor and comments during the year. Um, his the meme all year was he kept saying in the press conferences, "The team's tired. The team's tired. Oh, we're just tired tonight." Um, First half of the season, I can buy that. And I was at a few practices. He was yelling at him. But once you hit to February and you have a lot more gaps in between games, yeah, I get it. We have a lot of home games in December and a lot of games in January. That's the real meat of our season right there, where you're going to have a lot of Sunday on the road, Wednesday back at Giant Center, Saturday on the road, Friday, Saturday on the road, maybe the odd 3-3, Friday, Saturday on the road, Sunday at home. I get that. But you got to find a way to power through it because nobody's going to feel sorry for you. And when we got to the one comment in mid-March, and everybody knows what I'm talking about, it's my most listened episode of the podcast this year. When he said, "Yeah, we should bring along a few veterans on the trip because the guys aren't listening to me anymore. They stopped listening to me weeks ago," and I went nuts over this on the show. I lost my mind. So I said, "You can't say that. You've admitted you've lost the locker room. You cannot publicly say that." Now, I think in hindsight, I think maybe he was trying to be funny in the moment because listening back, the tone does sound a little, yeah, I'm going to bring along a few veterans along because, these kids aren't listening to me anymore. It did have a little bit of that tone to it. But then I think the second comment, and I know you brought this up in an article, of when they lost to Bridgeport, him saying, "Oh, yeah, our top guys played like junk tonight. I'm going to have a good talking to with these guys tonight. Tonight was unacceptable, and I need to have a few words with them." And that's where I went, wait a minute. A month ago, you said these guys aren't listening to you. So now you think you're going to march into that locker room and everybody's going to start listening to you? I mean, thank goodness I was not down there in the press because I would have asked him that at the post-game press conferences, and I would not have been back up in press box ever again. But I would have asked him that. "Coach, you said a month ago that the players have stopped listening to you and will listen to the veterans more. So what makes you think they're going to listen to you tonight if you said yourself they've stopped listening to you?" And I think that's what really made a lot of people upset, that he did publicly call out the players when he himself wasn't getting the results. I mean, and at another time, I'm trying to phrase this the right way. He's calling them out now when a month ago you just admitted they're not listening to you. So which one is it? Are you going to be the laid back dad, or are you going to be the dad who suddenly starts enforcing bedtime? That's to me like what it sounded like, and that's what I think really threw a lot of people off. Yeah, I might have said something on Facebook about the chance to do it. But I can be a little troll goblin sometimes. I'm a chaos goblin. Sorry. Um, but I think, given the way the season ended, I think honestly there's kind of no reason to get rid of him because he did what he was supposed to do. Like, if you think, like, despite all the stuff we said, Ilya Protas, Rookie of the Year, Andrew Crystal came along quite well. Bogdan Cherneryev developed quite well. Henrik Rybinski did quite well. He got a lot out of Grant Cruikshank. Injuries aren't his fault. Clay Stevenson played very well, and honestly, he kind of did the best he could with what he had, despite everything I've said. God, I sound like a hypocrite. The the defense rests.
Well, right along what you said, you starting with King, and there's a lot of times where you look at his quotes and they don't look good in writing, right? Like there's a lot of times where I'd put quotes in articles and I would be like, "Ew, this does, without the spoken word on it, it doesn't look great." Like when he says like, "Oh, they won't listen to me," or something like that. Then you go back and in his introductory press conference, he said something similar where it was like, they need some good veterans because they won't listen to me. And you kind of wish that it was just a little bit clearer because, like, when you say that, oh, the locker room doesn't listen to me anymore, you're sort of like, my man, like, please, tell me you're joking because, like, that just doesn't sound good. That's not what you want to hear. And you know, I give him a lot of credit. He had a hard job coming in after Todd Nelson, universally liked, finger on the pulse all the time. Said the right thing. He always had the what seemed like the silver bullet. You think back to that one time, 24-25 when they played real bad when it snowed, and he said there's a lot of fans that came out to this game who risked a lot to get to this game, and we play like that and saying it's unacceptable. And like you're like, yes, that is exactly what we wanted to hear at this right time. So it's kind of hard to go from a guy like that who is maybe just a little bit more of a blunt, straightforward kind of guy to this guy who's like, oh yeah, like when you're listening to him, he's dry. He's got really dry humor and talks like that. And when you hear those things, you're like, okay, this is just kind of we got used to it, right? Like towards the
Yeah,
second
yeah,
half of the year, where you're like, this guy's just dry humor. He's rough around the edges a little bit, but he means well. But there's some points where the disconnect that disconnects you from the fans, where to the point where you're like, some people will say like he's saying this odd stuff about the players, and I don't like that, and they're not winning and it's not going well. Fire everybody and start over again. And like you said, fair unfair, there was some good things that came out of this season. Alex Suzdalev was a guy who really
they,
seized the
yeah,
reins,
yeah.
is a guy that could grow into an AHL star at the very least. The young kids like Gucciardi and all of those guys took their lumps at different points during the season, but it's for their development. It was probably always going to happen the way that it happened, maybe not exactly the way we wanted it to happen, but it was always going to be a little tough for that reason. And um like you said, it's probably not enough to say that this needs to change in a major way, but I do think for a lot of Bears fans, and that this next season is put up or shut up kind of thing. This is going to be, if he doesn't have a reputation yet as the follow up that didn't fill the shoes of Todd Nelson, this year will be really vital because it needs to be a good year for him and for the Bears, and to give us something. We need to see that coach from the playoffs and the end of the season where I was at a practice where he skated around the stretching circle at the end of practice and high five, fist bumped everyone and said, "Hey, good job, hey, good practice, good hustle, good skating." The identity was there, and therefore, like, you could get behind this a little bit more. And that's what we need to see this season. It needs to hit the ground running this way. The right team needs to be there for the whole season. We need to see this guy have a good season because he's not Todd Nelson. No one's ever going to be Nelly, but we need to see that this is something that can be a result of having him here. And to make the fans feel better, to make you and I feel better, everyone feels a little bit better if you have, you see some good improvement this season.
Yeah, and we'll get into next season here in a little bit. Um, For those of you that are listening and following along here on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the Grit and Barrett podcast channel. Please do. Every little bit helps support minor league hockey podcasts out there. Just everyone, that's going to go a little bit longer than usual, but it's my own dumb show. I determine how long this goes. But I mean, you're right. Next year, I feel like, is going to be a big year for the Bears, because up in DC, changes are coming, kicking and screaming. Changes are coming, and I think that the Capitals, with some players, they're kicking the can down the line a bit. I can't say that much. My team, Pittsburgh, is kind of doing the same thing, as they got bounced from the playoffs because of a certain defenseman for the Flyers scored in overtime in Game 6. I'm not bitter. Why are you asking? Cam York will never have to buy a beer in Philadelphia again. But I'm not bitter. Why are you asking? The Capitals are gonna have some holes they gotta proverbially fill on this. So I will just bring it up here. Let's see here. Let's go with Puckpedia to begin with. Is that you'll see it up here on screen, everyone. Come on. This will work, I promise. So as of right now, I mean, you see up here, the Capitals have 10 forwards up here. Dubois, Tom Wilson, Dylan Strome, Matt's brother, Alexei Protas, Anthony Bavalier, Ethan Frank, Ryan Leonard, Ilya Protas, Miro, Justin Zardoff, all staying. To be re-signed by the Capitals, Ovechkin, I don't think he retires right now. I have this fan theory that him and Crosby are retiring together. David Kemp, I don't know if they're going to keep him around. Brandon Duham, I think they might keep him around. And McMichael and LaPierre are restricted free agents and are due up for some new contracts. On the defense end, it seems like it's pretty much tied up with Jacob Chichurin, got signed long-term last year. Faviari, long-term. Same with Matt Roy. Rasmus Sundin, I think they're in the first year of his extension. Timothy Lindgren, he just got an extension. Dylan Chaseholm isn't expiring this year. McElrath will be an expiring, and Trevor Van Riemsdyk is a free agent. I don't think they bring him back. I think they move on from him. So it seems like there is chances, at least on the Capital side, where there seems like some chances for some Bears to move up, especially on the forwards line. For the defense, not really. But we have a lot of youngins down there who can develop while some of the bigger contracts work down. But there's some room here, depending on what the Capitals do in the offseason. And they have $31 million to play with. So they got money and capital to be able to fill this offseason.
Yeah, I agree. It is another one of those years where it's going to be telling what the Caps do, because you look at the cap, and obviously everyone's getting a little bit of extra money to play with. I think you're right. I don't think that Ovechkin goes anywhere, at least, but if you get Ovechkin to come back, you have to put a competitive team that can try to win the Stanley Cup. That's, basically a requirement to have Ovi coming back. And, what, in a sense, they might double down with what they currently have. I think that you could see either unrestricted, or maybe even, someone like LaPierre maybe walked to make space, because, if they want to bring Ilya Protas up, one of those guys is going to have to go. And, you kind of saw the writing on the wall for that sort of thing. Maybe they want to try to court somebody in free agency or a trade, maybe. Like, there's possibilities, and it's going to be kind of telling, everything's on the table for the Capitals at this general stage. And, we're going to see how badly or not badly that impacts the Bears, who are already going to be pretty young. I mean, maybe they play with their, increased depth pool of players to, ship somebody out to try to make themselves a little bit better, since they do have a lot of prospects coming in. There's a lot of options there potentially for the Caps. But that's going to be the thing, is if Ovechkin stays, then they are going to be trying to win now. And that is always going to be the case in DC in that case. So, we're hoping, that's going to impact the Bears a lot to see one, if a guy like Protus moves up, which seems almost guaranteed. How much if they decide to trade a top chip prospect who may have been in Hershey, and then for the Bears side of it, they have a lot of veteran spots to play with right now. Those had to be filled out appropriately. Um, for number one for them, but for the kids and that development stage there as well. So pretty, despite there being a good number of players from last year's team still under contract, there's a lot that's up in the air right now for me as to how the Bears are going to look. And that 1st of July, typically July 2nd for the Bears, how that's going to look is going to be a really they got a lot of work to do, and that's going to be a big portion of it is getting those right veterans. Like we just said, filling Aaron Ness's shoes is going to be really hard, but they're going to have to try to do it. And you saw how many years could we go back and examples of guys like Sam Annis, Matt Molson, Phil Maillet. You think of
Yeah.
all those different crazy additions the Bears have had, they'll find something, but it's just going to be telling what kind of season they're going to have until that happens.
Yeah. The Bears really, I think, ever since Helmsy has taken over, despite what I've seen on social media, I think he's done a really good job. He's had a lot more hits than misses. Has he had bad signings? Oh yeah, some of them not his fault. We mentioned Sheldon Rempel earlier. You can't predict somebody leaving like that. You can't. So I think this offseason will be telling as to like what we're going to get and what exactly this team's going to be. Now that I think now we know what type of team possibly King wants to field this year. So I'm going to bring up the Bears offseason tracker. This straight from the site. Also, Corey has his own on Hershey Bears Nation. He has his own free agency tracker. I just brought this up because I've the Bears saved as a save tab. Um, so Miro's sticking around for at least another 2 seasons. Spencer Smallman returns, hopefully healthy this year. What a loss that was for him. Rybinski, he's what's called a UFA Group 6. I do not know what that is. People who make more and are smarter than me knows what that is. Matenko is still an entry level. God, I hope that leg of his is doing better. Zach Funk has a year left on his entry level deal. Sonny Milano went overseas. Crookshank got an extension, so he's coming back on the AHL level. Cristal's staying. Brett Leeson wasn't expiring. Bob Giovanni was. Ryan Hofer as well. Ludwig Pearson, another entry level. Same for Milton Gastron. We're going to see him more full time this year. And by the way, a rookie called Milton in Hershey, the advertising writes itself. I'm just saying, Hershey Bears, the marketing writes itself when you have that. But Dalton Smith, he's an expiring Protoss. We're not going to see him again in a Bears jersey unless it's a rehab. Sutzelev is staying. Sam Bitten is staying around. Many fans rejoice with that. Trenriev is staying. Stroman expiring. Lupin isn't expiring. Gaffney, we saw a little bit of him out of college. He signed a contract, so we should be seeing him next year as well. On the defensive end, Cam Allen staying. Riley Webb's an expiring. Chesley, same thing. Shuneman expiring. Belpedo, we still have around. Aaron Ness, retired. Leon, another entry level. John McDonald, expiring. Gutierrez staying around as well. And lastly, on the goaltenders, Bjorklund expiring. The guy we got from Vegas expiring. Clay and Mitch both sticking around through next season, though they are expiring. And some more guys who were South Carolina guys are listed here. And then some free agency additions. Aaron Dahlquist signed to an ATO, but he was part of the Black Aces. Tyler Piersek, he should be joining the Bears coming out of juniors next year. If I remember correctly, that's going to be one of the bigger rookie names to come in next year.
Right, he's a first round draft pick of the Capitals from a couple of years ago. One thing I saw on this list here, the one that's not listed here, I think it was just because he wasn't in Hershey. Should also pencil in Lyndon Lakovich
Okay.
as well, who was a first round pick from 2 years ago, I think at this point. Um, he unfortunately had a really bad, I think it was a leg injury, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong
Mm.
about that, but his season got shut down like back in January, pretty much. So
Ugh.
but when the team, his junior team, put out a statement about it, they basically said, hey, good luck in the pros. You're going up next year. Like he's not going. Basically said he's not going to be back. And
Okay.
they basically said like congratulations. We appreciate you and congrats on turning pro, kind of thing. So you suspect that despite that, that's going to be kind of a harder learning curve for him. A little surprised to not see that on the Bears tracker, but that's obviously just because he never signed an ATO or anything like that because he's rehabbing his leg injury. So, and like with Aaron Dalkfist, not 100% sure we're going to see him just because it's a crowded blue line and he's still pretty young. Um,
Yeah.
you know, but you had to include him just because he was on an ATO to get a look from the Capitals type of thing. So, there's some good possibilities there that I'll be interested to see, how they aren't handled. And Dalkfist in particular, he was only drafted last year, so he's still pretty young. It would be a little surprising to me to push him this far, but he was between um, levels in the Swedish hockey league where he was playing with Nick Backstrom and a lot of former Bears like Christian Juice as well was on the same team as him. It was kind of a cool Capitals Bears connection over there for him to maybe have some good guidance over there while he was developing.
Yeah, and I was taking a look at Puckpedia, who's they're a great resource for any hockey fan or podcaster or blogger as well. The Capitals heading into the draft this year have 5 picks this year. Their original pick is 16th this year, and they they have another pick which they got Anaheim's first round, which I think as of right now is 18th. Um, it was a conditional. It was a conditional this year. I gonna try. I'm trying to see what exactly. Okay. Should the conditional was should Anaheim qualify for the 26 playoffs? Anaheim will transfer its 26th first round pick to Washington. If they don't make the playoffs, Anaheim has the option to retain the 26th first round, but transfer its 27th first round instead. But as we all know, Anaheim did make the playoffs, so the Capitals are getting that this year. So at least Puckpedia said 16 and 18 for the Capitals this year. That's still not bad. You can get value in the mid first round. The Capitals, have made good picks between that 15 and 23 range. I think Miro came from that. Um,
McMichael
came from that
also.
in the first. What?
McMichael as well. I think
Oh
was
yeah,
from maybe
McMichael
even further
definitely.
down on that.
McMichael did as well. I think Loppy did too. I think Loppy was in the 20s
I
as
believe so.
well.
Yes, during that
So
COVID one, which
yeah,
was a very strange one. That's for sure.
but we don't talk about 2020. We don't talk about it. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. Okay, 21 and 22 didn't happen as far as we knew. Because I remember I was at work and that pick was made, and I think I texted our former PA guy saying, "You need to have Voodoo Child as his goal song or something because we have Hendrix in the lineup." God, I'm showing my age, but anyway, I think the Bears, the Capitals, they'll 5 picks is still pretty darn good. They do not have a second or third rounder. They have a fourth, a fifth, and a seventh. So they'll still restock the pipeline. I think decently enough. I think once Ovechkin does move on and a few others do as well, you're going to see more of the draft picks. I don't see the Capitals full blown tanking. I think they'd be more in a soft rebuild scenario. Flush some veterans and some prospects who aren't panning out, and then reload on the depth, which is what we've seen teams like Anaheim, Pittsburgh's kind of done it. The Flyers, I think, kind of redid that, but they actually really did rebuild some really good prospects. So I think we're that pipeline between Hershey and Washington, I think, still is pretty good, despite Ovi hitting pretty much the final bend of his career.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's, the Capitals, they have a lot of prospects right now, especially ones that are going to be in Hershey next year. So it will be interesting to see if they leverage that to help them in any way this offseason. But when you're talking about the draft, is that, the Bears have historically just gotten so many guys that have helped them to Calder Cups out of the draft. I mean, you think about McMichael and Loppy and uh, Iorio is another one who, were the kind of core crux, young guys from the Cup years type of thing. Now it's trending to be more prospects than vets, where the prospects are, core guys. Miro's another good one that, was a big component of the Cup the second time around. And, just like you said, just such an important thing. And, the first round, those are, having picks, what is it, separated by 2, 16 and 18, I think it is. Those
Yeah,
are great. Those are great slots to have, where you're not going to, it's not a guy like how Ryan Leonard was, for example, where it's, or Cole
right,
Hudson, or am I getting,
right.
whichever Hudson the Capitals have, I'm forgetting. I think it's Cole.
Yeah, the Cole.
Um,
You're right. I think it is Cole Hudson.
I started second guessing myself there. But anyways, it's not one of the, I hate to say it's one of those top chip prospects where like they're just going to bypass Hershey like we've seen with those two guys. These are guys that, they will spend some time in Hershey in some way, shape, or form. And that's exciting for the Bears because, those are two big guys that, they might not be here right away, but they're going to be, like how McMichael was, where, you think back to that the pandemic season, the shortened one, where, that was a real draw for those games, is to see him make his first strides and obviously come back for the Cup year a couple years later. Those are the guys that can really are exciting guys to have around here. They are getting one of those guys this year with Tarek Parasak and, as well as Lakovic as a first rounder kind of guy. Like those are the guys that are make or break guys for the Bears. So, it's going to be fun to watch how, a very fun first round, the draft kind of day. Capitals fans can kind of wait a little bit the second day to tune in, I guess. But, you know, front loaded draft, and that's fun. That's going to be fun to watch. And, whether they use those picks or trade them or something along those lines, we'll wait and see. But, there's that's going to be a fun draft to watch for fans of the Bears. That's for sure.
It does feel like this draft is very much loaded this year. I mean, Gavin McKenna aside, it seems like there's some really good prospects out there this year. And before we get to the penultimate topic, I wanted to talk to you about. Actually, it may not be the penultimate one. You might know a little bit more about this than I do, but there is a big change happening between the CHL and the NCAA that it seems like for those who don't know, those in college hockey can now declare 5 years in college hockey now, where it's no longer just spend a year or two in the CHL and juniors or in the USHL, then jump to college for 3 years, and then either join your team or declare. The NCAA is offering 4 or 5 years in college hockey, and the CHL is very worried that this is going to take away from a lot of their top prospects because Gavin McKenna went to Penn State last year, the number one prospect, and did pretty good there. Some other top prospects are leaving the CHL at like 18 and are going to pursue a year or two with U.S. College hockey. And while this is really going to help college hockey here in the U.S., there is some worry up in Canada that the CHL is going to be weakened from this.
I think that's fair to say. And I mean, you do have the added clause of the new CBA where, those tweener kind of players like we've seen a couple of times affect the Bears, where, a guy like Andrew Cristall just falls short of being eligible to play in the AHL, where, I think the rule is that you can have one of your prospects that are just too young to be in the AHL. Like now you can kind of, push a guy like Cristall could have been here a year sooner, basically.
Yeah, I
There's going
think
to
it
be
is
that.
now. I think it is now if you're a first rounder and you're 20, you're allowed to come into the league now. or like if you're turning 20 by a certain point and you're a first rounder, you're allowed to come in. Like they're trying to expedite that pipeline a bit quicker.
Yeah, they're trying to have it so, some guys like, like Crystal, that I think the rule is that you had to be turning 20 before the end of the calendar year, if I remember that rule correctly. It's something very, odd, and like Crystal was on the other side of that by like a couple of days to a couple, like less than a month, basically. And you felt, you're sort of like, man, like, now he has to make this decision. Jet Luchenko from the Flyers was another example where you had to make this decision:
Yeah.
is he going to stay up in the NHL or the CHL? There's no in between. But like you said, I do think that those rules are kind of tough for CHL teams because it does take away from some of that draw of top prospect X or Y plays in and makes your league so much more interesting to watch. But on the flip side of that, the CHL is a development league that I personally am seeing it's lacking a little bit more recently in preparing these guys for the AHL leap. Like, you saw Crystal, where this guy just put up video game numbers over in the CHL, and then he comes to the AHL, and there was a huge adjustment curve for him. And you feel bad for him because it's like, he's getting hit harder, checked closer and tighter and stuff. And it's just not quite the same. And college hockey, for props to them because it's a little bit. I think it gives you a little bit more of that edge, maybe that the CHL maybe isn't as much. I think that's just the fact that these kids are in the college ranks are a little bit older. You're playing against heavier competition. Gavin McKenna is a great example of that, where he's going in there. He didn't put up crazy video game numbers, but it's more of a challenge for players like that. So I don't know if there's concrete steps for the CHL to say, hey, we're going to do this or that to change our game to make it a little bit different. But it's still an important pillar of prospect development, and they have some strict rules there for you got to stay there for so long to be AHL eligible and such like that. But I'd be a little worried if I was them as well. And obviously, I'm sure they probably have something in their back pocket to help with that. But you just saw the Memorial Cup ended a couple of days ago as of recording, and it was still a really great tournament, competitive tournament. Cam Allen emerged from that as a Memorial Cup champion before coming to Hershey. It's a very valuable tool of development there. That's for sure.
Oh, it definitely is. I'm not too much into it, but I know of it just through playing a bunch of EA NHL before it got really, really bad. How they'd always start you off there with the Memorial Cup. But yeah, that usually wraps up by Memorial Day weekend here in the States. But yeah, there's been concern that like the top prospects aren't going to be there, and it is a big difference. You go from playing against literal teenagers, 16, 17, 18-year olds, to full grown men, even in the American Hockey League, and you get smacked around like a lot. Like, I think it was Ryan Chesley this year who did not have a great year by his standards and by a lot of standards. And this was a guy who, like, I think I saw from like, he had like a ridiculous plus minus in the CHL and was a force for, I think he was with Kelowna, the Rockets, I think. Don't quote me
I
on
think
that.
I think
Um,
Chesley was a college guy, if I remember
college
correctly.
guy.
I think he was
But
Minnesota.
yeah, yeah. I don't know why I thought him. Or is that Cam Allen I was thinking of probably. But anyway, the point is that like it is a big jump from one league to the next. And God bless guys like Cole Hudson, Ryan Leonard, Edmonton's Lord and Savior Connor McMichael, and others like your boy in Philadelphia, Mitchkov, who can jump from Russia over here. Wait, can I say Russia on the podcast? Yeah, I can. But yeah, those who can make the jump at a young age to the NHL is amazing because of the difference that it is, that there's not as much hitting in the CHL and the NCAA. And the bodies that you're colliding with are still teenagers. Now it's grown men who do not care, who can and will knock you down, pretty hard. And so, yeah, it's a pretty big adjustment. So we'll see how that does going forward. So We'll touch base on this real quickly. We talked about this in pre-show. Maybe Wilkes-Barre Scranton's still playing hockey by the time this goes out. Maybe they're not. But a big deal with them is that they are not drawing up there in Northeast PA. Their games 1 and 2. Their game 1 against Toronto only drew 3,500 on a Thursday, and then on a Saturday, 5,300 with noticeable gaps in the bowl. Not to do too much on a flex because we do draw very well down here. There was an interesting article that somebody put out locally for Wilkes-Barre is that there is very little marketing done by the team. And honestly, if you drive by Mohegan Sun Arena, you can't, outside of a sign that's a small corner on the LEDs, you don't know Wilkes-Barre's playing there. And it feels like how can you not draw for something like this? Springfield filled up for their games. Yes, 5,000 single bowl, but I've been to Springfield. They show up. We drew for our last game. I'd be willing to bet 6,500 for our last game. And yes, about 500 to 1,000 of them were Wilkes-Barre fans. I know they showed up, but still, that's a heck of a lot better for an elimination game in the first round that outdraws a team that is in the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in a decade with the best team they've had in a decade, and you just only get 60% of your arena filled. That's a problem. And also for another side note, Bridgeport was right behind them in attendance, and they moved.
Wow, that's a telling stat. It's tough because it's like you may be more familiar with Wilkes-Barre's history than I am, but I feel that at least from what I remember years ago was that the Penguins, Wilkes-Barre drew usually a good crowd. Like they had a pretty loyal fan base that drew well for years and years. And you even saw it in the Bears series where just as you said, the Wilkes-Barre fans came down to Hershey in at least game 2 that I remember up. Would that have been game 2 up in Wilkes-Barre? There's a lot of Bears fans that went up there for that game.
Yeah.
And they were
that was
audible.
That was a hot
and
ticket.
It was outstanding, and it was the Bears fans really showed up well for that game. And so it's virtually the same token there, but it's kind of a mystery because the Penguins, they've been around for a long time now, since about the turn of the century there pretty much. Always kind of had that ragtag, scrappy fan base that they'll see your tweets about them and they'll be wanting to go at you over it. And they're right because they lost and it was only because the referees fixed it against them, kind of thing. They have that kind of that rough and tumble attitude type of thing. But their attendance numbers are baffling because it's like, do people just not care about them anymore? Like it seems kind of inconceivable considering their past thing, but it also kind of justifies, just opposes with what you said earlier about Bears fans. Bears fans are everywhere. They show up and they, even with this team the way that it was and our personal gripes with it, the fans still turned out to support this team, which really speaks to how great the Bears fan base is. So if it's another, just like these banners in your show background here, which I love so much, it's pretty great because it's they have great fans, a great history, and hey, we won a lot of Calder Cups, which our Northeast neighbors can't really lay claim to, which is always fun to be able to say.
Yeah, it is. It is. So moving on to we'll wrap this up with this is that for those of you who listen to this this podcast, this will not be the last time me and Corey will get together. We'll still have our midsummer schedule reveal. That's always a fun episode. We look forward to do every summer. And if any other big time breaking news happens over the summer, we'll get together and do something. But as of right now, do you think we have a captain next year? And like we kind of said earlier, is this really a put up or shut up year for the Bears? Like, I don't like. I feel like, and we talked about this in pre-show. I expect the Bears to take a small step forward next year, but I don't expect a big one. Probably more of the same. I think it said Clay's still coming back. We'll still have him, but we lost some manpower this year, and that does hurt in the development. Losing Aaron Ness is going to hurt, and we're really going to need some vets to come in and fill a lot of the gaps that some of these guys are leaving behind. So I think the Bears are going to take a small step forward this year, but don't expect this team to, I think, like suddenly be leading the Atlantic next year, because I think there still might be some rough waters ahead.
I do think it hinges a lot on what happens in the offseason on, July 1st or 2nd. Is like you said, captains like Ness don't grow on trees. And so my big thing is, if they're going to be able to build on what happened this year, that's going to be the biggest area that I think needs to be targeted. And do you find a captain in free agency, or do you look from within? As it stands right now, I don't see anybody that I would say stands out to be the captain. Like when Dylan McElrath got promoted, Aaron Ness was the obvious choice to pick. I just don't see anybody that obvious from this roster. I mean, you look at some of the vets. All they have right now is Spencer Smallman and Louis Belpedio. Both of those guys are great vets. Captain, I could see Belpedio maybe wearing the C. He's got a lot of the good qualities, but it's you know, I'd be hesitant. It's not a head and shoulders kind of thing. I think he's the most obvious choice if you were to pick somebody, but I do think that that hopefully they can wrangle a captain type player out of free agency, or at least a good supplemental couple leaders. I don't know that I necessarily do see them doing the three alternates again, like they had for a couple of years. But I do think it's going to be an interesting conversation to be had because the more I'm talking about it, the more I'm kind of liking the idea of Louis Belpedio being the captain. But 'cause you do see a lot of these guys only really get the captaincy after they've been here a couple years, right? Like Matt Molson was that case, Dylan McElrath was that case. Aaron Ness is obviously that case where they didn't come in right away. And, you see a lot of what Belpedio said at the end. He's really quickly become a guy who has seemed like he's been here longer than he actually has been. So, he's the more I'm talking about this, man, I had nobody in mind when I started talking. And now that's the direction I'm leaning in, honestly. I'd like to see the most, but you do have to see what happens in free agency because I think a captain is only as good as the vets you put beside him. And I'd really like to see the Bears, land a couple of big vets, maybe get Mike Vecchione to come back, someone who's been here before, would be
Yeah.
nice, but is perhaps a pipe dream, I guess.
Hmm.
Fantasy perhaps, but it would be great. It would be, that's kind of what you're hoping for at this point is to have a couple of guys who know what it's like to be in Hershey, the expectations, they respect the culture, the desire to win here, and that takes a little bit of time. So, I think that it's going to be a tough season to maybe chisel that out, though I would put Belpedio as my early favorite for that. But it is such an honor. It's not like most other minor league teams in that respect that you have someone that knows what it means. So I guess the end of the story is that I don't think you can find an Aaron Ness in free agency. Maybe they do go with 3 A's. I honestly could see that being a possibility too. A leadership coalition type of thing. Um, it's just going to be a wait and see thing because I think a lot of times that emerges in the early days of the season leading up to it, like training camp. So I think that's going to be a really important time, to have that hopefully expectations set out, but someone's gonna have to earn it. I think it's an earned position by no small means. It's no small feat to be a Bears captain, so it's gonna have to be earned. That's for sure.
I think I had two options for captain. I mean, you talked me into Louis Belpedo, so I'll say that's one of them. I think he'd be a really good captain option. And two, they would have to re-sign him. But I think Matt Strom could be a really good captain.
Oh,
Um,
definitely.
I think he's been a Hershey guy for a while. He's worn the A when he's needed to, and I could really see him as being a guy who is, the one who's always talking. They're out by the half circle with the refs. Him and Louis are my two options, but I think realistically, I think they go back to the 4 or 5 alternates. I think realistically, that's what they go back to. I don't like it. I said that over a decade ago when we did that with 14 through 17, where we had the 6 A's. I think it was like 6 of them. It was absurd. But I could probably say who I'd probably give all those to. Well, not all of them. Like I could say Smallman gets an A. He sticks around. Smallman gets it. If Schooneman comes back, he gets it. Louis definitely gets one. You could make an argument for Grant Crookshank getting one. You could make an argument for him getting one, and another veteran like that they bring in. And I'm sure there's those that I've probably forgotten as well. But I could absolutely see the Bears go through like 4 or 5 captains, 4 or 5 alternates next year. Yeah, like Grant Crookshank having one, Spencer Smallman having one. And you know what? You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. Put an A on Sam Bitten. Let's get nuts. Let's go crazy. Let's go crazy. Let's go crazy. Fans love him. Fans love him. I mean, when he was out for 3 months, that's all I heard on the fan club page for about 3 months. When's Sam Bitten coming back? When's Sam Bitten? When is he? My daughter loves him. My niece loves him. Has anybody heard about Sam? He's sitting at practice. Is he coming back soon? I'm just saying. But I think they go with 4 alternates next year. But I'd love to be proven wrong. I think Belpedo is a strong option, as you said, and I think Matt Strome could be a really good option too. But that's been a healthy talk for you and me, Corey. Nearly 75 minutes of here, just us yakking about Bear stuff as we're about ready to push off into the off season. So, Corey, before we get out of here, why don't you let people know where they can catch you?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, this is a great conversation. I'm posting all the time over at Bears Hockey Nation. I'm endeavoring to try to at least do like once a week articles, maybe twice. Most of the time twice if I can keep thinking of stuff to talk about there. But been planning on covering stuff all summer long and getting set for the next season. So it's over on Twitter, Facebook, and we have an Instagram page. So wherever we mostly just post the great photos that Carl Minieri takes. He's our photographer over there. He's fantastic. Or if I get a good picture of something on a cell phone, maybe, but I'm far from his caliber, that's for sure. So yeah, appreciate you having me on, Richard. This is a fun chat, and I appreciate doing this over the summer. It keeps us sharp and keeps us ready for each season of Bears hockey over the summer. Hopefully, we'll be having a schedule, free agency talk, all the good stuff coming up here soon enough.
Oh, we will. And the content train does not stop as the hockey season winds up, Bears fans, because next week, by the time all you listen to this, next week, June 15th, right here on this channel, the roaring man himself, Mike Vecchione, will be on this show, and we'll be talking to him next week. Having that interview setting up, we're gonna get it. We're gonna get done tomorrow. Again, done well. We're gonna get it out next week for all of you. I know there's a lot of Bears fans that are looking forward to this, and we will have him on as the two leagues wrap up, the American League and the National Hockey League wrap up. Champions Roll Call will be returning at the end of the month. One of my favorite episodes to do, where we will go down champions of each and every hockey league that exists out there. Thank you to Hockey DB that always helps me out with that this year. And then we'll have our usual free agency stuff. Once that comes out, once the free agency hurricane hits in July. And so the content train does not stop, even though the Bears season has ended. But until next time, Bears fans, enjoy whatever hockey's out there. Love, hug, cherish whatever hockey's out there, because it will be gone before you know it. And it's a long off season. good God, is it a long off season. But until then, until we meet again, Bears fans, my name's Richard Blosser. Thank you so much to Corey Swartz for joining me, and we'll catch you next time.